Hello, 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 folks. Hello, hello. How's it going? It's Sunday. It's Sunday, February 15th. Just going to give it a little bit of time as folks come in. I'm a little bit later than normal because my ass needed to get some sleep. All right, y'all. So here we go. Come on in, y'all. Come on in. I am back. I am here, and I'm still queer. We're going to talk about queer. All right, with this new moon in Aquarius coming in. So come on in, y'all. Come on in. Get your hey, Shay. How you doing? How you doing? All right, y'all. Get your coffee, get your weed, get whatever you need. As always, we're going to do this thing this week. All right, y'all. I want to give it a little bit more time as folks come in. Settle in, y'all. It was Valentine's Day yesterday. Now I ain't had no Valentine, which is fine with me because I was my own damn Valentine. But I did do a pop up. Hey, CC, I did do a pop up over in Babes. I'll talk about later. So it went really well. It was a great day yesterday overall. But goddamn, am I tired? So I needed to get a little bit more rest before I got up to give out some more energy today. All right, y'all, let's get started. Let's get started. Thanks, Shay. I appreciate it. Here we go, y'all. Here we go. Power to the people. But do the people know where their power lies? That is the main question this new moon in Aquarius will be planting on Tuesday as we got the sun and moon along with Pluto and Mars in the sign of the collective. Ruled by Saturn. Saturn's in Aries right now. That is also who is ruled by Mars. So Saturn and Mars are in each other's homes, and with the Great Mother next to Neptune in the sign of the head, and Mars sitting in the collective with the Lord of the Underworld. This is an invitation to create new strategies of resistance. So can we learn from the dead? So we can create new ways of living. So once again, family structures are in the conversation as the new moon again is at 28 degrees. We've been talking about this since when? The new moon last year in Virgo. And this time, this new moon's in a square to Uraunus in Taurus, the planet of change and the weird. So this new moon is also an invitation for all of us to get a little bit more queer. So this is the weekly forecast for February 15th to the 21st. New moon in Aquarius with the Saturn and Neptune conjunction. It's time to get queer. Welcome back, y'all, to Yapping with the Stars, the show where I talk about what it means and takes for us to become human once again in a world that is trying to convince us that this is all there is, and it's not. So let's talk with the cosmos and see what else is possible. I am your host and guide, Nicole Rouse, a storyteller who comes from a line of storytellers who weave and tell stories in many different ways. And as an anthropologist, astrologer, and artist, I work with astrology and ethnography to explore the stories of what it means for us to be human. Because right now the present is up for grabs. So who is leading the stories that will bring us into our futures? Now, every Sunday we check into the chaos we call society and ask two questions. What's the cosmos got going on for this week? And what are we being called to move, create, burn, build, and or reflect upon? All right, y'all, how y'all doing? There's a lot going on in the sky this week. I'm not going to lie, as always. And if Grace is here, she's probably going to say, really, Doc, once more? Yes, here we go. Once more. All right. Because this is the time of the new beginning. This is the time of new seeds being planted. But what does that really mean, y'all? And I want you to reflect upon this, okay? I want you to reflect upon your relationship to things that are new. What does that mean to you? What comes to mind, right? When we talk about new seeds, new plantings, new beginnings. What is the imagination that brings you into that so-called newness? And once you look at what is new to you, I want you to compare it to what already is. This is where comparison needs to come in as an analysis. And then from there, your construction of new versus what you already know. If they're having a conversation, do they know each other or are they strangers? And right now, we need the latter, not the former, right? We need the ability for the newness to actually be new, to break the things that we have been told are unbreakable, because every time we have looked for the past few years, when a state has told us it can't do something or it's not possible, they have somehow made that impossibility a possibility. Inadvertently, right, these authoritarian regimes, because they cannot hold up to their own hype, have shown us the power, funny enough, of manifestation. It has shown us the power of dreaming and believing your story so much that you make that bitch not only your reality, but everybody else's, right? We have actually seen this, y'all. I want us to believe our realities and also in that way, okay? What this week is asking us to do is bring in the new, bring in the different, bring in something else. But do we even know what that is? Do we know what that means? Right? Or are we susceptible to constructing a new kind of story or stories that are just different versions of what already is? Therefore, confining ourselves and deluding ourselves to believing we're being revolutionary, whatever the hell that means. But in actuality, we have just given up our offerings to the state once again, making us the perfect vessels for it to infiltrate, to seep in. Ring shout back here. I really do recommend. If you weren't in the discussion when we talked about that book last, when was that, y'all? Who's in sound landscape and soundscape? We talked about that last like fall, I want to say, when we read that. I really recommend the book Ring Shout. It's a very short novel by Clark. And I recommend it because it's a great representation in story form of what it means for folks to digest their oppressor and do so willingly. And the monsters that come knocking, the monsters that are at the door, the monsters that are actually in us all, because we have become willing participants in our so called subjugation, therefore becoming the colonizer as we are also colonized. So, what does a new beginning mean and look like, y'all? What does the new beginning mean and look like? That's what this week is bringing up. And it starts, honestly, today. It started a couple of days ago when Saturn moved into Aries, all right? So Friday the 13th, y'all, how did y'all feel? I want you to go back in time, go way back in the time. No, baby. Okay, sorry, y'all. I'm still waking up. So you're going to get me a little goofy. Go back to Friday the 13th. How'd you feel? Where were you at? What were you doing? All right. And I really do mean that. What were your bones saying, if you can remember? And I'm asking that, right? Right? Great, like a new beginning, light. So that's interesting. So Shay, and I know Shay's an Aquarius rising, so as a new beginning, right? I want you to really pay attention to that. Pay attention to how you were feeling, pay attention to where you were at. And then if you know your chart, look to the house that Aries sits in. And what does that govern for you? And see if there's any conversation being had. Now, I'm saying this because Saturn did go back into Aries. Not every transit will be impacted by people, but this transit will impact everybody because it is in a conversation also with Neptune, which is a collective planet. So with that, Saturn being the most outer, that most outer inner planet, right? And then next to Neptune, which is the planet of the deep waters, of the illusions, of the stories that is coming to the surface. There is a way, and Cece said she felt good in the morning and tired as the sun went down. That makes sense, right? Because this was essentially a new beginning. Saturn, the great mother, was emerging from the deep waters. She was coming to shore, taking her first breath, right? So this is taking the breath from the feet, coming from the feet up to the head. This is an activation. So what is activating? What is being activated as we have Saturn moving into Aries next to Neptune? It is you. It is your head, right? It is you. It is your head. So I want you to remember that feeling, okay? Ah, you felt like yourself, Desi. That's interesting, right? So I want you to remember that feeling and ask yourself, what does it mean to sustain that kind of feeling? That's the key here. Saturn's about sustainability. How do you follow through? How do you make it a new part of your structure, a new part of your understanding of the sense of self? Because Saturn is the great mother ruled by Capricorn and by Aquarius. Capricorn being our structure, being our skeleton, being our teeth, being our bones. Funny enough, talk about Capricorns. Actually, let's talk about some Saturn rule folks. I love y'all. Capricorn and Aquarius energy. I love y'all. Y'all get on my goddamn nerves. And I tell Saturn rule folks this all the time. It's a love relationship, honestly, through irritation, because there is a way that the energy of Saturn is so misunderstood. Let's be real. I really do believe we misunderstand the energy of Saturn because we have been kind of force fed to see that planet through the lens of the patriarch. And when we understand patriarchy truly at its core as having this kind of inherent, I'm going to say actual jealousy of the matriarch, right? Of this understanding of creation. Because we talk about matriarchy, it's more than just being a woman, y'all. I really do mean that. That's going to piss some people off. It's more than just being a woman, how we define it. It's about creation, right? It's about the mothering. It's about the nurturing. right? So this is why you have the idea of femme, and you can have different things between your legs and still carry that energy, right? When we understand Saturn as is again this kind of oppressive patriarch that requires you to be disciplined, because the construction of boundaries and borders, the construction of structures and systems, the construction of time and reality is through the lens of discipline versus devotion, right? The definitions of these words through an energy that requires you to conform through a hierarchy. That is what patriarchy is, right? When we understand that that has limited our ability to work with a planet that actually is the one that gives the most shit about us, we got to take a step back and ask, what does a new beginning mean and look like, right? If we're carrying over the same old ass, tired ass tropes and stories that keep us in a loop that always tells us that somehow, no matter how many new beginnings the cosmos shows us and tells us that we have the ability to navigate and take and do, we keep telling told though, but you can't really do it because the minute Saturn comes in, Big Daddy gonna what discipline you? Who does that serve, y'all? And does the shit make sense? Right? I want you to take a step back. What does it mean to have a new beginning? What does a new beginning mean for you? How do you define new? What comes into your sight? What comes into your vision? How does your body feel? What do your bones say? Saturn rules the bones, y'all, the structures. And now Saturn is coming from the structures into the head, saying, what does it mean for you to own your structure? By owning the way that structure's constructed script is laid out. So this is about identity. We're going to be doing, I talked about this before, but identity breaking. Because next to Neptune, this is about the new stories and new archetypes. Archetypes are really important, y'all. If you're in the Patreon, sorry, y'all, I lost track of time. I've been working on, I'm kind of in geek out mode. I've been working on these kind of lessons, seminars, conversations around archetypes that I'm going to be testing out with my soundscape folks. So don't worry, we're coming back together. I'm going to have some videos for y'all because I need you to do some kind of quote unquote homework before we can actually come together. But this is about recreating the archetypes that we have been fed, force fed through space and time. And what does it look like if we own our own head by being in our bones and allowing our bones to collectively come together to become the logic that helps us strategize collectively something differently. This is what Mars in Aquarius will be aiding and abetting with this new moon in Aquarius on Tuesday. Because Mars is our strategy, Mars is our drive, Mars is our creativity, Mars is our anger, Mars is sex, Mars is war, but Mars is also strategy. In the sign of the collective, next to the Lord of the Underworld, Pluto on one side, and on the other side of Mars, you got the sun and moon, which makes this new moon. Okay, the sun and moon come together, so it's a dark night, right? You can't see anything. The two have come together to create something new, which is also you. Sun and moon is you, but sun and moon is also your parents. We forget that a lot when we talk about these moon cycles, and I think that's important right now to remember, especially for this one. Pluto, Lord of the Underworld. This is also collectives. This is generation. This is power. This is death and rebirth. It's also the banks. It's where the money resides. There's a structure of power in a society. Okay? We'll keep that in mind. We got Mars. Mars, like I said, personal. It's a personal planet. It is your drive. It is your understanding. It is your anger. It is your rage. It is your creativity. It is your passion. I am Mars ruled. So this is a good example of somebody being Mars ruled, is me, right? Through its water. Sun and moon, you, your sense of self, your light, also your body and your emotions, all sitting in the sign of the collective of air that is ruled by Saturn, who is in the sign of you, the head, Aries. What are you starting that then will allow you to come into and create the collectives that can actually start some good shit together? Got to be starting something, right? That's what MJ said. So what you starting? What is the beginning and what is the construction of what it means to start something new? So how do you define new, y'all? And I want you to ask yourself that. This is where dreaming comes in. And this is also where the dead are. Because Pluto's also in the sign of collective, Lord of the Underworld. So now we got the dead here. How are we strategizing with our dead? How are we learning from them? I've been talking about this for a while. Neptune is from the deep waters. The dead lie in the water. If the Lord of the underworld and the Lord of the waters, the Lord of the water has come up to shore, all right, come up to shore next to the great mother. So there is also a growing up and a maturing of the dead. Please don't think that when you die, you stop growing, y'all. You still got to grow the fuck up when you're on the other side as well. So we got the dead kind of grow up and and take their own heads back. And now we've got the collective being asked, right, to have this new beginning, a new drive that we must find within us so that we can figure out what these collectives are. So how do you define new? How do you define new beginnings? You got to figure out your relationship to diversity. What is your relationship to difference? What is your relationship to diversity? All right. We're going to take a step back even further into time. Let's go back to the mid-2010s. What was the big thing in the 2010s that was kind of a big trend? It was DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And there was this promise, this collective promise. Now, this is when Neptune was in Pisces. 14 motherfucking years, right? Not only did we get a bunch of scammers and schemers, right, in all kinds of religious ways, we also got them in kind of drugs, right? So this is when we also see the rise of a lot of these MLMs with pharmaceuticals and the kind of overpricing of various types of treatments, along with the gouging of things like insulin, right? But you also see at this time this kind of rise of this performance of difference in response to the performance of activism. And I'm saying performance for a reason. So then we have this whole push of people saying we got to have diversity and representation. And somehow representation was going to fix a nation that refused to have and look at its own kind of condensation and damnation. Right? We got a nation that won't face its past. So what does it do? It puts up something shiny and new. What was the shiny and new thing in the 2010s? DEI, representation. But what that showed us, y'all, and I want us to go back in time for a reason. Can we learn from the dead and learn from our past? This is really what the conversation between Aries and Aquarius is having because of those planets. Can we grow up and understand where we come from? Because at the same time, when you look at the way that that representation was rolled out and who was put into certain roles, where those roles were constructed and created, okay, and the actual teeth they had, what it actually showed us was just how allergic is the society we are to actual differences. All those DEI kind of initiatives, many of them were nothing more than assimilation tactics. And I talked about this, I wrote about this, I said this, I did literal ass programs about this in the 2010s. So this is not me taking a step back and now want to have all of this kind of critique with no teeth in the game. My motherfucking teeth were in that goddamn game. That's why I'm no longer in that plantation house. Want to make that shit real clear, right? Because when you actually deploy the theories that people perform, you literally you get to see just how much people only understand action through words and not through movement of the body. Okay? But when you put your teeth into something, when you activate something, that actually shows you just how committed folks are to said concept, to said goal, to said end result. And we see what the end result of DEI was, right? They rolled all that shit back, and now they're using the exact same kind of foundations and logic to now extend that to who? White men, because now white men are the ones who are the diversity, right? They're the ones that are the most marginalized. They're the ones that have been pushed to the side. So now we must use those structures that are built for the margins. Structures. We must dissolve those structures and then just resurrect them once again, but for the site, the identity that we see as a nation. So when we understand and see the history, right, y'all, when we understand that storyline, then we have to believe the ways that we have been shown how people react to things like newness, to diversity, to all of this shit. Because we've seen just how susceptible people are to reproducing the same kind of storyline. So this new moon in Aquarius is going to be one that is also in a square to Uranus. Uranus, the planet of change, the planet of shock, the planet of revolution and rebellion, the planet of new innovations, also the planet of higher knowing, right? This is genius energy. but it's going to be in a square to this new moon in Aquarius. How smart is the collective? How smart is the collective, y'all? I really do mean that. How smart are we? Right? And we can show how smart we are. We can get indications of how smart we are by looking at what the opposite of Aquarius, Leo. We can look to see who our leaders are. That shows us just how smart we are. And then if that is not showing us exactly who we really are, then there is going to be a what change happening structurally, Uranus and Taurus, excuse me, before it moves into Gemini. Taking its last leg, saying, baby, are you sure y'all want this? Do you want this? I don't think so, right? But what do we actually want? New beginning. But how do we define new? Let's talk about that Super Bowl, y'all. Who saw Benito Bowl? I ain't want the game. The game was there. I don't know what's going on in the game. Who saw Benito Bowl? Who saw Benito Bowl? Who saw him take that bowl, that football, and turn around with that white on and then start walking down, talking about his aunt saying he got a lot of girlfriends. That's what the translation of the song was, or something. That was a great indication. Like I was saying last week before I had seen it, I said that's going to be a great indication of how susceptible the collective is to new stories. Like that's going to tell us just where we are collectively in our story making and where we are now, how we understand the now, where we're going. Right. And I'm going to be honest, y'all. Some of y'all not going to like me. Some of y'all not going to like me for what I thought about that shit. But I was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So now we're seeing the world through sepia eyes, right? All that was to me was a great indication of just the stories that people want to tell about our future. It's one that is a goddamn remix of the 1990s Hands Across the World, right? I understand what the sentiment is, but in this current moment, I find it actually a bit dangerous. And this is what I mean by that, okay? This is what I mean by that. I find it dangerous for the collective because the collective has shown ourselves that we can be very complacent. We want to feel good in a moment. We want a feel good moment, but we don't understand that feel good moment is not sustainable action. But action is not always having to be this fight in the ways that we have been taught by the state. Action is in the actions that we take to construct and take responsibility for building the structures that can be sustainable to create the so-called worlds we want. And if it's Hands Across the World, United Colors of Benetton that folks really do want, right? If that's really what your goal is, to have this kind of one world united where we're all the same, I want us to really take a step back and think about that. Why would you want that? Why would you want Hands Across the World? We're all the same. We're all going to be mixed. That is not new, y'all. Baby, that is not new. The initial research I was going into grad school to do, that I wrote my PhD application initially for in 2003, was looking at the construction of mixed race identity and the nation state. That was what I was going to go to the UK to look at, right? Because of how the way that the idea of mixedness has been used by Western nation states in particular to construct these origin stories that either create this kind of what do you call it? Pure being. So the kind of strict British system of the binary, or has this kind of imagination of a history of all this mixing and all of this, we're all the same, that is now called mestizaje, that we see through through the Spanish and the Portuguese colonial projects, right? We've been here before, y'all. It's the same story, rinse and repeat, the Xerox machine. I talked about this last week, even before I saw Benito Bowl, right? Of this kind of PRing that nation states do to have us imagine this idea that if we were all just mixed up, then somehow that would skirt around all of the atrocities that happened that constructed these goddamn nations to begin with. The imagined community via the nation state, via the Western nation state, does not actually create community. That's what we're seeing right now, y'all. Because every time we try to use that logic in one way, shape, or form, we come back into a origin story, an overarching story that's also seen as a resistance story, that all we need is love. But what is love? Love is just fucking people so that you create brown babies. So we just want to see the world not through the white supremacist lens, but through the lens of sepia? We just beige and shit? Baby, we already know what that looks like too, because we've seen it literally in the various colonial projects, one of the biggest ones being Indonesia. We have seen this. There is a lot of work that has been done through the idea of mixedness, right, in the colonial project and desirability. Indonesia becomes another example of this through the Dutch colonial project. And the way they use desirability and what they were trying to do is construct mixed identities to essentially become the intermediary, to become the bureaucracy on the island that would be the stock that would have the so-called intelligence of the Dutch, but then the so-called physical ability to navigate the environment of quote unquote native folks, right? This is a breeding process. And in doing so, there was this fucked up idea that somehow these mixed race bodies would be these kind of technological vessels. This is technology, y'all. This is technology. That they would be these technological vessels that would do the bidding of empire. Right? But when mimicry becomes a menace, this is Omi Baba. Now, Omi Baba got his own fucked up thing, and I swear to like he's got his own shit. But this is the kind of post-colonial literature and theorizing that came out that helped us understand. You cannot use the colonizer's logic because it will consume you. Therefore, the colonizer and the colonized do know nothing but violence to themselves, one another, and everything around. So, what is the definition of new for you? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? And then what is the present day that you already know? And compare those two. Have a conversation with them. Have them sit at the table with you. And then ask yourself, are they strangers or are they actually friends? And why do you want them to be friends? This is what the new moon is inviting us to do, right? Because again, yes, Shay, exactly. The collective wants to feel good. But that feeling good is temporary. But is it really feeling good or is it a distraction? Why are we bringing this up? Because we still got that North Node in Pisces. So while this is all going on, we got all this new. Let's not forget what has been kind of solid, that's been stable right now in these signs, these nodes. South nodes in Virgo, North nodes in Pisces. The collective also is having to go through a purging and a re-examination of where your faith lies. Right? And faith lies in the stories we construct, because this is the deep waters. This is still the energy of Pisces, but Pisces through Jupiter. But where is Jupiter? Jupiter is still in Cancer. Retrograde. So all these new moons that have had Jupiter, that have had been 28 degrees, have been majority when Jupiter's been in retrograde in Cancer. 28 degrees being the degree of Cancer. So there has been an expansion, because remember, Jupiter expands thing. Jupiter is the good time dad. Good time, not a long time, not a stable time, but one that will come in and try to dictate to you the laws that it sees fit. Because remember, Jupiter is the planet that rules law and order and governance. It was the patron planet of the Roman Empire. I need you to remember that. Jupiter was the patron planet of the Roman state, the Roman Empire via the Roman state. Jupiter, a good time daddy that likes to come in and spread his legs, man spread, right? Because it thinks he can. But in actuality, what it's doing right now is shining a light on the foundations of what it is that we all need to reflect upon, which is the family structure itself, which is where we get nurturing and care from. And so now we've got this new moon in Aquarius. Where does the collective need care? What do we collectively need for nurturing? Right? Where does this lie? Well, we got to look to see then where is Mars? Mars is ruler, Aries. Aries is saying you got to grow up. So going back to Benito Bull, what was revolutionary about that? I understand representation. But has representation gotten us the liberation that it claims and purports it will get us? Because I agree, Eden. National identities are not elementary enough to be building blocks for a collective. It is not. That is what we need to remember and understand and get into our bones, y'all, and learn from, and what the dead are learning, I believe, as they have to come up into the shores, into the head. Neptune is on land now for 14 years, right? Do these identities actually make sense? Do they? Do any of them? How do we are supposed to be these imagined communities via these constructions of who we are. But if that's not who we are, if that's not who we are, then how do we construct collectives? This is about the new beginning, y'all, because what we're going to do is we are going to be having to bend and break our attachments to these scripts that have bent and broken and confined our bodies, our sense of self, our identities. So Saturn is saying it's time to construct a whole new culture, a whole new understanding. But you got to be careful, because if you don't root in that, if you don't own that, somebody else will come in and construct that story for you. So then we got to go down to what Pluto's saying, because Pluto's the lord of the underworld. He's transforming in the collective. But what is he transforming? Again, the opposite, Leo, the self. So representation, y'all. This is my question. This is my question. This is the biggest question that I've had for a while, and it got solidified after I watched Benito Bowl and also watching people's reactions, because I purposely went out. I didn't really care about the game, and I really don't care about necessarily being out in public like that on a Sunday, because it's usually my day to finally rest. But I wanted to go out because I wanted to feel, I wanted just to see people's reactions. And as I was up at Nobody's, because I can't go to the straight bars, y'all. I don't know how y'all do it. How do y'all do it? How do y'all do it? I don't know how I did it for so long. God damn. Sorry. But so I went up to the queer bar, and it was really interesting, right? It was, people loved it. It was a good energy. There was not somebody with the emoji. Y'all crack me up. It was a good energy, right? It was a good energy. And it was really interesting to watch. And I was like, we don't know how to dream. We don't know. We're so starved to be seen, and it's not just that space. I've seen this everywhere, right? I've seen the online reactions, right? And it's not something that is shocking at all, but it really solidifies, right? It really solidifies this idea that we're so lonely. We're so lonely. We want to be seen, right? We want to belong to something. And when we get thrown these kind of scraps, when we get thrown these abilities to kind of see ourselves in the spaces of the majority, like, that does seem like a revolution, but it's only a short-lived feeling, right? Has representation gotten us the liberation that it said it would? Or was that also an MLM? Right? Right? Did we get sold, y'all? Remember how I said that we like to be conned? Did we get conned once again, being sold this idea of representation as liberation? Did we get conned thinking that, that we had to put our kind of movement making through the 501c3 process? Right? Did we get conned thinking that knowing the problem means that the knowing is the doing, so therefore people don't do shit but actually just critique, because they are too afraid of moving that body, because you're so disconnected from the body, that if you actually sat in that body, you would ask some different questions, one of them being, why are you allowing yourself to be led by the spirit of a theorist who is dead, who is the embodiment of the colonizer that you say that you are supposedly pushing back against? You are using your colonizer's logic to somehow push back against the colonizer, but in actuality, we have all digested all of this shit. Therefore, the violence of the colonizer will always be enacted upon, but also can be reproduced by the colonized. That's Wuthering Heights. Let's talk about Wuthering Heights. We're going to come back to Benito, but Wuthering Heights, I ain't seen it, but I've been listening to all these responses, and people hate that goddamn movie that I've been watching, right? The ones who have read the book and understand, and who love Bronte and stuff. Full disclosure, Grace, I love you. I did not enjoy the book either. Thank you. I was just going to say, I hated that goddamn book. Like, I read it in high school, and I know, Shade, people love that book. People, and I get it. I get it, right? I really do. So I'm not even saying something's wrong. It's just I'm not a huge fan I'm just not a huge fan. Period, point blank. But the story itself is an important one, right? The story itself is an important one in literature, in the Gothic kind of literature era, but also in the archiving. The archiving of the impact of slavery on that goddamn island. Because a lot of folks like to get amnesia, right? Them Europeans love to give amnesia. You the main ones that started these goddamn trades, but all of a sudden you think your locations are the fucking lands of milk and honey, even though that there was no milk nor honey there. That's why you took your raggedy asses off that little peninsula and spread your violence around the world. That's a whole nother rant I can go into. But there is a way, right? That book is important. It's telling an important story in a historical moment in which it is reminding the reader, it's showing a mirror to society, right? It's showing a mirror to society in a time in which that trade and that whole kind of economic system was making folks a lot of goddamn money, but at the same time, it was also making a hell of a lot of folks sick and dying. It was dehumanizing folks. It was a way in which there was a whole new construction of living in life. There was a whole new systems of governance that were created around maintaining these so-called biological racial divides that justify the dehumanization and enslavement of whole populations. Right. And so then you're seeing all of this kind of interesting kind of social dynamics playing out in these relationships. Because why? We're relational beings, y'all. That's what I'm saying. We got to go back to the family structure and how we treat each other, because that will then dictate and influence how we set up these structures and systems, particularly of exchange. So whether you like the book or not, again, I don't like the book, but the story is important, shit. And you can't call something a book that actually has a significance of it, and then basically you put on screen fanfic from what it seems, and not very good fanfic. But it's interesting representation. There's a way that movie and the way it's at least been shown right now, and you put that in conversation with the Benito Bowl, okay? And then you put those things in conversation with shows like Bridgerton and Industry. Roll, stay with me here, y'all. Stay with me here. There's an interesting thing that it goes on when you take a step back and look at the storytelling and ideas of representation and what is being represented through who and why. Because when you take a step back in all those different ways, right, who gets absolved in a weird way in all those different iterations, from the Benito Bowl, interestingly enough, to what was the damn show I was talking about, y'all? Wuthering Heights, the movie, right? If you've seen it or heard about it, to shows like Industry and Bridgerton. What gets absolved? Who or what gets absolved in those remakings of locations of historical significance, whether it be in a deep past or a current reality, a current present that is also in a past? That's what Industry is, because Industry is really showing us the current moment of the impact of private capital and equity and banking and stuff, right? Who gets absolved is the goddamn power structure itself, because we're so fucking worried about representation. So all of a sudden, in all of those things, the structures of power are removed from the horrors, right? The actual horrors of particularly Bridgerton and Wuthering Heights of the Colonial Project at that time. They are both set in the time of England, that they are the height of empire, the fucking height of empire. I love a good fiction. I love a good fantasy, but there are some things that you cannot, for me, remove from the actual reality. And I cannot watch any kind of show that wants to fantasize a group of people who literally were known to cannibalize those in who they were enslaving. I can't. But here's the thing. Why do we need to be represented by monsters? What is our relationship to new? And how does that relationship to new dictate our imaginations and what we see as individuals and collectives we are going to go into? So then I'm watching more about Wuthering Heights, right? And it's interesting because she does bring in representation, but of characters that actually should not be minoritized because it truly makes no sense because it fucks up the power dynamics. Well, of course it does. Because when it's told through the lens of a white woman who thinks she's telling a story about class but has not actually turned the mirror around, you will always have what has always been there showing up loud as shit: whiteness. Why? Because whiteness consumes. It consumes every and anything. It doesn't make any sense. It's also illogical. So then you get these stories that really don't make any fucking sense, but we're fed to them as somehow imagination and fantasy that we must lean into because that's Black excellence, or that's brown excellence, or that's queer excellence, whatever the fuck excellence it is. What is excellent about being represented by mediocrity? So what are the stories that we tell? Because then you look about Bridgerton and then industry even. Industry is also interesting if y'all have watched it. I'm not going to try to give away too much. Exactly. Excellence under the white umbrella. That is my point, Shay. So we're trying again to be represented and be seen by a structure and an entity and an ideology that will constantly move its floor because it's looking for its next host to infect. And because whiteness via the white body's host is breaking down, because it's sold out your bloodlines and so it's incestuous. Your structure is gone. The structure of your connection to the sacred is no longer there. So there is a kind of decaying. There's a walking dead. So now this energy needs a new host. It always has. This was always a finite investment in the white body that it was constructed. Okay, I want you to understand this, y'all. Because the white body was always finite in one way, shape, or form, that energy knew it was going to have to jump hosts eventually. So what is the best host? Then a construction of identity based upon an imagination that somehow we are all just mixed, so we are all one. Differences to the side, it is one world order, hands across the divide, let us hold hands. We are the world. We are the children, right? We've been here before. This is my whole age ass growing up in the 80s and 90s. And then while they were doing that, you know what else they were doing? They cut music, they cut arts, they cut funding, they broke up homes, they put crack in the goddamn communities. They made sure that if you weren't going to prison, you were taking your ass and grooming yourself into a corporation. Then when the whole economy crashed, they told us, baby, just gig economy it. What is our construction of new? And how do we tell different stories that do not put us into the same types of scripts, just in different fonts? Well, what's our relationship then to difference, to differences, to allowing uncomfortability to sit next to us and realize that that must now become our new familiar, right? Uncomfortableness must now become our new familiar to work with. Because when we rely upon feeling good, we can see through space and time collectively. All we need is a little song and dance and a little two-step, and then people feel as if the revolution is here. That literally reminded me of that Kendall on what was that? What's that Jenner girl name? What's that Jenner girl name? Kendall? Or oh shit, I'm sorry. The Jenner girl who did that Pepsi commercial, right? When it was the Black Lives Matter and the police gear riots, right? Were landing up, and she said, "Baby, here we can do." Kendall, thank you, Forrest. Kendall, let's reach across the divide, and all we need to do is have a Pepsi. Like, I'm not critiquing for critique's sake, y'all. I really want you to hear me when I say that. I'm really not. I truly am not. I want us to tell a different fucking story. So I want us to believe the reality we're in and take action and take this energy seriously. I want us to take this energy seriously because that's just Tuesday. Okay, that's just Tuesday. Oh shit, Desi, you are right. Benito and Kendall dated. Baby. Y'all. I forgot that. Baby, that track. Sorry, I just had a revelation. That makes sense, right? That makes sense. The Beijing of the world. This whole sepia thing, and Forrest gave me that line. I got to quote his ass. Forrest is the one that was talking about the sepia nation, sepia king, right? Because that's all I could come back to is this, and also everyone being in white. I get it, y'all. Okay, I am somebody that's in a tradition that works with white. We have to wear white for certain things. We're going to and doing certain ceremonies, right? But it's really funny to me that people can understand a plantation economy all of a sudden in plantation history when you got a bunch of light skins in a motherfucking plantation field cutting down sugarcane. But the minute we talk about the plantation economy and the plantation system in the southern United States of America, all of a sudden folks want to say, oh, all we do is have slave stories. I'm tired of looking at the slave stories. This is more than who we are, right? When in actuality, we still have not understood or learned the impact of those goddamn plantations in the south of the United States. And it was more than cotton, it was also that tobacco. And tobacco was deadly. The Carolinas, and they did. They used the Barbados. So there was always this conversation happening between the Caribbean plantations owners and the planters and the southern planters. Why? Because when all those uprisings were happening in the Caribbean, y'all, half those planters fled to the south. And then there was constant uprisings happening in the south. So in order for them, because white folks were scared, and rice, thank you, Grace, and rice, thank you. Them swamps were also deadly. Forgot about the rice. So it's funny that we can understand the historical record and its atrocities when it's in a body that is acceptable to be seen. Sepia. So now we understand. Now folks can understand some shit. Now you can understand nationalism and power structures, right? And family and culture. So now you can see culture. When it comes in a package, in a body that is acceptable to you, I am not knocking that culture. I am saying I am tired of the goddamn contradictory locations that people will pull out their ass, right, in order to uplift the same goddamn story and call that revolution. It's not, y'all. Because when you can only see it in a certain body, but you refuse to see it in others, but then you use that other as a commodification for a whole global economy, I am looking at you and saying, baby, you digested that oppressor so goddamn good. You can't even see how all he has to do is, again, show you a little bit, and you become the vessel that puts out his shit. Right? And tobacco did become a staple. Tobacco was a staple around that world. And it's also a sacred plant. That's the thing too. All of these are, but tobacco's also a sacred plant. So you got a plant that's used in sacred ways that also got colonized, that got brutalized, that was made to also participate in an economic system that it did not want to be. The relationships we have to the land, y'all. So again, you can understand culture when you see it, folks playing dominoes, right? As he's walking through, singing a song about his girlfriends. But you can't see culture anywhere else. We do the same thing. You got spades. We play dominoes too. Niggas be on the damn corner. I'm from Chicago. Like, I get it, but I don't, but I get it, but I don't. So what does it mean for us to tell a new story based upon identities that are constructed in different ways, that are not relying upon the definition of community and identity and structure that we are trying to break? Family. What does family mean? Via care. So what do you collectively need for care? And if we use that as the strategy, that will then allow us to think about who we are differently. So again, this is about a breakdown of the self. Because remember, Pluto's going to be opposing Leo. This is the new beginning, y'all. But when Jupiter moves into Leo in the middle of this year, it's going to start opposing Pluto. There's going to be an expansion and an opposition to the father, to the understanding of the father, the patriarch, but also to the sense of self, and where the self digested the patriarchal's understanding of the father and where that has to die to be reborn. But this is about the child. So if the patriarch is no longer there, if you allow yourself to shank that motherfucker because he ain't done a goddamn thing for you structurally, intimately, spiritually, then what comes out to play? Who comes out to play? Your child, right? Your child. Pluto has to kill the patriarch so that your inner child will come out and play. That's the only way we're going to create. It is the only way we're going to create. We're only going to create if we allow ourselves the ability to imagine, to create. And so later this week, y'all, I'm signaling this now because this is the beginning of that unearthing of your inner child. And I do mean this. Take out, if you're rolling your eyes or being like, oh, Jesus, the inner child work. I don't want you to hear me through the lens of a kind of love and light whitewashing. This is some serious work. This is some serious work. And I do mean that. To figure out, to root in, to find your inner child, to have your inner child trust you, because maybe that person don't know or like you, right? To sit here and face the demons, to face the darkness, to face the things that we may have put behind us because of the ways of which patriarchy has been put upon us, right? When you remove the lens of authority that had its foot on your neck, you're also inadvertently removing a weird sense, right, of security and safety, even if it really wasn't secure or safe. It's just familiar. So we're going to get a taste of this later on in the year. Chiron's going to move into Taurus for about 2 months. We're going to get a little taste of this. I think this is important because Chiron moves into Taurus around the same time that Jupiter starts moving over into Leo, if I'm not mistaken. But these overall transits this year are really important for us because it is going to show us our attachments to these kind of authoritarian type of systems so that we get real with ourselves. Because it's really cute to say burn it all down. It is a lot harder to build something back up. And if you have ever been in a group project, if you have ever been a part of a team that claims itself to be led by an innovative leader, but then you become the one having to do the actual logistics. Here's the thing, y'all. Revolutions and movements don't start on the street and get one on the street. They start when you feed people and when you have good administration. Right? I hate group projects too, Grace. Right? Movements start, revolutions start when people are fed and are sustained, when people are fed, kids are cared for, and there's some structures that make sense so things can flow. I've been working with organizations, right? I'm working with an organization and I'm doing some strategy work with them. And they're radical organization, movement work, been in movement work for a very long time, very well known, right? But there's a rubber meets the road. There's a growing up that's happening right now with them. Happening right now with a lot of movement, or movement work, period. Everyone's having to grow up. The kind of illusions we all had when we were in our 20s and early 30s, right? A lot of us in our 20s and 30s were doing this work and we could stay up all night and we had these dreams and, we just make shit happen. Well, we're not there anymore. We're in our 40s now. Some of us in our 50s and 60s, right? And older. And there is a way that those dreams of flattened, structures and no hierarchy and all of that meets the reality, though, of if you don't want a hierarchy, which you don't need one necessarily that is top down and one person rules everything, well, that requires everyone taking responsibility for what goes on. Everyone not only has a say, but has actions that have to back up whatever you want to say. So it requires a lot more buy-in. So this is the growing up of it, the dreams, the illusions, the delusions, the naivete that allowed us to create, to begin to dream of something different, right? That did move things. It's not all in vain at all, not all in vain at all. But now comes the sustainability piece of it. Now comes, how do we maintain this shit? Well, now we got to figure out different types of structures because they've all been dissolved. Neptune and Pisces, along with Saturn, dissolved all that shit very quickly. So as it dissolved quickly, right, there is an urgency to build, but we must build from a place of grounding, from a place of reality, from a place of understanding the reality we are in. So what is our relationship to newness? What does new mean? What is different? So therefore, what's your relationship to difference? Okay. And so the stories we tell give you an indication of that. And that's what this week is going to start to bring out even more. Because this new moon is also an eclipse, which means change is here. And with Uranus in the conversation, it is what it is. So if change is here, right? And Chiron is going into Taurus later on. And then Jupiter is going to go into Leo later on. There is a way right now, the stars are really trying to help us and say, girls, boys, they, thems, all y'all going to have to get very comfortable with change. So it's time to queer some shit. It's time to get comfortable with queerness. And I'm not just talking about sex, y'all. We got to really get beyond that at this point. We really got to get beyond it at this point. It's about difference. It's about your relationship to difference. So therefore, what is your relationship to your own difference? Will you allow yourself to change? Because we're all going to go through it. We're all going through it, going to go through it. Saturn and Aries with Neptune, there's going to be a breaking of identity, whether you want to or not. So you might as well bend and break that shit to you. Otherwise, if somebody will bend and break it to theirs. And I'm sorry, I refuse. I'm too stubborn to let somebody else dictate anymore who the fuck I am. And you know what helped me understand that and get it into my bones, get it into the Capricorn, the third house for me in my bones? Coming out as queer. Now, I'm not saying again, you got to come out as queer. I'm saying leaning into the construction of queerness as a praxis, right? Which is freedom making and taking. It is a construction outside the norm because queerness also allows you to understand that you cannot do this thing called life by yourself. We need each other. And when I say that, we need each other. We need each other. So what does it mean to have something and create something new collectively? Well, you're going to have to get fucking weird, y'all. You're gonna have to get weird. So you're gonna have to get queer. You're gonna have to maybe get out there and move that body. I've been talking a lot online, if you've been seeing some of my stuff, about how you need to shake your ass and make an offering. Because that really does indicate just how susceptible you are to buying into a construction of you that is regimented. It ain't about being good. It ain't about, it only being about so-called quote unquote women who do it. I'm saying everyone. Everyone. If a space has music and it is inviting you to come in and fill it up, then make the offering and get the body going. Allow it to talk to you because then it will show you, right, your construction and your relationship to difference, to change, to new. It literally opens up new pathways. This is the North Node in Pisces with Venus there right now and Mercury. Use this energy. I'm so tired of astrologers always talking about the doom and gloom of some of these detriments. At this point, again, if the stars are saying it's time for new beginnings, then give the goddamn planets new stories. They're also tired of these raggedy ass old goddamn Roman and Greek gods. Aren't you? Aren't you? Let's be real, y'all. Come on, y'all. Let's have a conversation. Ain't nothing against the pantheons. Listen, that's what y'all do. But at the same time, mythos also has to be reconstructed. It does not remain stagnant because it doesn't make any sense for mythos to remain stagnant. Because if these gods, right, let's think about this. Let's do some logic, y'all. If these gods that folks give offerings to, if they remain the same, right, then how can they accept new types of offerings? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, things change for a reason because a lot of these gods are representations of different parts of nature, no matter what pantheon you're in, right? They are different aspects and articulations of nature, just through the perspective of a cultural tradition that usually indicates the social, economic, and political structure of that culture. So it's a both and. They inform one another. The cosmology informs the economic, political, and social structure, and the social economic structure over time will then influence and shape the mythos that then solidifies, again, that structure. It's a loop. It's a loop. It's time. Saturn rules time and culture and tradition. And she's saying now in Aries next to Neptune is 0 degrees for the first time in millennia. Huh. Bend and break that shit somewhere else because, y'all, this is some raggedy ass shit. Because not only did that keep us all in loops, it also kept Saturn in a loop. All of a sudden, Saturn can't move either. All of a sudden, Saturn, who rules the margins too, is a structured kind of disciplinarian who tells you can't move. That doesn't make any sense, y'all. If Saturn is every 7 years you get squared and every 28 years is a sense of growing up, who helps you grow up? And if you're growing up, are you supposed to be confined? No, you're supposed to spread your wings and fly. Come on, let's use different logics, different stories, different ways of being, because the North Node in Pisces is saying collectively, y'all, it's time to dream differently. South Node in Virgo, you got to release the shit, literally. The way that you have criticized and critiqued and made docile via the idea that if you know something, it is doing something, but what is your stomach saying? And can we stomach this stuff anymore? Where's the book again? I want you to read Ring Shout, because what are you digesting and why? Literature. And I mean that, y'all. So what are the stories you're constructing and creating? Because on Friday, we get Neptune and Saturn conjunct in Aries. And the ruler of Aries, Mars, will be at 22 degrees in Aquarius. And that's going to be starting a square to Uranus, okay? Again, in Taurus. So we already had the new moon squaring Uranus and Taurus. We got Uranus and Taurus in a sextile, so a shorter conversation with Chiron and Aries. Chiron being the wounded healer who now is trying to heal because Chiron's going to be making its way into Taurus saying, okay, if you got your head, now we got to go into what you believe security and safety are, because that's what's going to be the foundation for you now to own that fucking head. So you can't get comfortable. So uncomfortability is going to have to be the new familiar. And the strange is going to have to be the comfortability that gets us to be docile and escaping. Representation. Why do you want to be represented by monsters? Why do we need to see ourselves in the construction of reality via the monster? This is why I like Lovecraft Country. In Patreon, we were trying to watch this for a while, but then they were not kind to me. I was trying to watch it with people. So I think we got through the first, 5 episodes before I could not just show it anymore, even after buying the whole goddamn set. But it is a familiar, strange familiar, because what I liked about Lovecraft, I'm trying, Shay, once I can figure out how to actually show it so that y'all can see it too, we'll go back to Lovecraft. But what I liked about that is it did a good job of talking about monsters. Monsters are knocking at the door, and they have been let in. So what does it mean for us then to see the monsters for what they are? And one of the ways the monsters come in is that it looks like you, sounds like you, talks like you, acts like you, makes you feel good for a minute. This is about love, y'all, and belonging. What is our relationship to love? How do you define love? Because that shows to me that we really want to belong. This is Aquarius, it's a collective, but you got to be careful. If you don't have your heart, if you're not letting your inner child lead, not the sense of self that was constructed by the patriarch. Pluto's got to kill that patriarch. Pluto is going to have to kill that in all of us, because that is not really Leo. Leo is the child. Leo is the performer. Leo is the vision. Leo is the sun. Leo is curiosity. It shines bright. You have to come to it, yes, but then you leave and you have something else that you can plant, and then you take that and you take it out to different collectives. This is why Leo and Aquarius are sister signs. Leo has the vision, then the collective takes it and pours it out in different ways. What are you pouring out? Well, first you got to take away that goddamn patriarch. So it's also going to be the fall of leaders. This is going to be beginning, y'all. This new moon in Aquarius starts eclipse season, so don't be surprised if we see leaders fall. But also the leaders show the collective who we are, and it shows us how smart we are. Uranus again is here in Taurus. So how smart is the collective? Well, I don't know, y'all. Some of these leaders, woo, some of these celebrities, some of these folks who get these podcasts and all these other things, like we have to take a serious look at ourselves and who we listen to and why, and where we, again, think about the new, okay? So on Friday, we have Neptune and Saturn conjunct in Aries. And again, the ruler of that, Mars, is going to be in the collective. This is about strategy. This is about the strategies that we deploy and how we work with, honestly, our ability to create. So what are we creating and why? And in doing so, that creation is we're going to be battling, quite frankly, I think, with ourselves. There'll be battle with the self. There has to be, so that you can bring the inner child out. And if your inner child came out, what does that little one want to do? What does that little one want to say? What does it want to create? Right? What does it want to create? What does your little inner kid want to create? What does it want to do? What does it want to say? Does it want to cuss somebody out? Right? What does it want? Literally, I really do mean that, y'all. Because this week, this new beginning is asking us to write the new stories. But the new stories require us to sit with our relationship to difference, to sameness, to newness. So it's really our relationship to queerness, our relationship to pushing back against a norm, to change. So if we're in the sign of the weird, Aquarius is the weird. Who are your weirds? But where does your weird lie? And if you allowed your weird to shine, if you allowed your weird to lead in helping you define what is new, what a new beginning means, what it looks like, what it feels like, then what would you create and who would you create it with? Because right now we're going to see the rise of people telling us that they are the new leader. We're going to see the kind of construction of identities that are going to try to push us more into these ideas of collectives that are much more docile in nature, because it's just much more buying into a majority versus actually standing on your own head. And we're going to see this through AI. I'm going to talk about this more as we get into Uranus, into Gemini, but this kind of promise of AI that will also bring with it a storytelling aspect that's already here is going to be pretty big. This is why I am saying stories matter right now. We just had, I'm going to end pretty soon, y'all, but there was an article I saw right before I came online that I need to look more into. But there is a young person, one of the Forbes 30 under 30. I can't pronounce her name, so I don't want to mess it up. A 26-year-old Turkish national person who was just charged with allegations of security fraud because she defrauded her investors around her kind of startup company AI fintech of $7 million. Now, in the scheme of things, that's not a lot compared to what other people have fleeced their investors for, but it is one of many, right? Forbes 30 under 30, I swear, is a list of who gonna get indicted next, because that list has done nothing but show who are the scammers, but it also shows just how easily people like being scammed. And so it's about the stories. It's storytelling. This is why I wanted to bring up industry. I'm going to be talking about the show industry a bit more in the show, because it does become a good example of the location of private equity and banking in the modern moment, and how it's all about stories. It's all a smoke and mirror. We know this, but do we believe it? And if we believe it, then the ability for us to construct different economic systems and pathways is vital. But in order for us to do that, there's a responsibility we all have to take in that construction. And part of that responsibility lies in how we understand relationships and treating each other. You see how it all goes together, y'all? So we're planting seeds to start new structures, new stories, but that starts with us as well and collectively, because then that will allow us to figure out who we look to as leaders moving forward. Because right now, the leaders that are leading and getting all this prominence are a bunch of fucking crooks. And that makes sense, because racial capitalism ain't nothing but a goddamn MLM, like I've always said. So if its economic system is built on scamming, and the people that we look to are scammers, it should not surprise us that we're going to see this. But again, we're susceptible because it tells us a good feel-good story. Founders' stories tend to be the thing that gets VC tech bros and all investors pumping money into it. Everyone's scamming. Of course, everyone is scamming. But can you be the better scammer? I don't disagree, Shay. Here's my thing. If everybody's scamming, listen, if you like to be scammed and you need to be told the story, then maybe let me scam you into loving you. Let me be the one that scams you into believing you. Okay? Because everyone does love being scammed. So let's use this scamming energy a different way. Because the shit don't make no goddamn sense, y'all. Half of this AI stuff is nothing more than powered by humans behind the scenes, because it is smoke and mirrors. It doesn't, the story is a fantasy. But when our storytelling and our sight and story making has been groomed in society to take history and filter it through the lens of the motherfucker who constructed that violence to begin with, but then when you get representation as liberation theory and you see yourself represented in the role of a colonizer, but now that it's black with a brown lead and y'all fucking in Victorian or Edwardian clothes, all of a sudden we can forget that history. That's why we can get scammed by the most ridiculous stories, because that's a ridiculous story. Do you see what I'm saying, y'all? But that's called liberation. That's called exploration. Right? No, what that's called is that we also have no attachments to our bodies. And so this kind of erotic angst, right, is a fantasy, is an escapism, because people are too afraid to actually have their pleasure met, because we don't know how to actually even have pleasurable experiences with one another. sex is demonized while at the same time over sexualized, right? Well, at the same time, straight folks are more concerned about gay folks having sex. Well, at the same time, we keep getting all of these indications that it is actually the so-called heteros who are the ones enacting some of the worst kind of atrocities sexually, but then you need a scapegoat. So we have these stories repeated over and over again. Why? Because we've all been told to disconnect from and not trust what? Our bodies. Chiron's been in Aries since 2019, asking us to face the wounding of the body. We got to take it back, y'all. And you take it back with the stories. So ask yourself, what kind of stories do you lean into that become the foundations of your daydreams and of your night dreams, right? But of your kind of world building. And is that world building, are those stories and world building archetypes, is it familiar? And should it be right now? That's what this new moon and this energy in the beginning of this eclipse season of rapid change that will be happening in fixed ass signs. Aquarius and Leo are fixed. So we're moving back into the nodes, moving into the most rooted parts of ourselves. After Uranus is leaving the most rooted or the rootest part of Taurus of ourselves, having brought in the energy of change there. Right? We're going to really see just how much a relationship to change has settled in ourselves as we have to face the leaders that the collective has elevated as a way for us to take the goddamn power back. Power to the people. But do the people know where their power lies? That is what the new moon in Aquarius is going to be asking us over and over again. And it's saying it lies when you what? Take back the goddamn body. Reclamation. Reclamation. So what does reclamation look like? It's taking back your bloodlines. It's calling down your names. It's really interesting. The same time you got Benito, right, and all this stuff. It's not even about Beyonce, but if you listen to Beyonce's Cowboy Carter, you listen to Kendrick, listen to Doechii, but also right now, you listen to Jill Scott's new album. This is why I'm bringing them all in the conversation. There's an interesting thing happening once again. Jill in her new album, I forget which song it is, she's calling down the ancestors. She's calling the names. Beyonce called the name. She told you her whole lineage. Kendrick will tell you the lineage. Doechii tells you that she's a student of a lineage, right? Even Meg's album is a lineage base, and she's very clear that is a Houston base, the producers, the beat, the flow. It's regional. It's culture, right? There's a reclamation that is happening that is requiring us not only to call back the body, but if you do know the line, to call down the line. And if that line is not for you, then this is what we're saying about remaking the family. Oh, she's Pimp C's daughter. Thank you. So what does reclamation mean of the body? And how do you tell a new story about that? That's what this new moon energy is saying and is asking us and inviting us to do. And it's Aquarius and Uranus is here. So it is time to get weird, y'all. It's time to get queer. So how do you do that? Well, you got to allow yourself to figure out what does it mean for you to be free. And that freedom is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be one of the most uncomfortable things you'll experience. You're going to feel like you're doing something wrong and you're not. You're doing everything right. I had a number of clients. So I had, I'm going to finish up, y'all, but I had a number of clients yesterday for my pop-up, and there was a running theme that I've also had in my one-on-one clients for my astrology readings. And my books are open because some folks have been asking me that. They are open. I got a number of new readings, so you can go ahead and book on my website. But there's a running theme that I've seen in folks is that when they're in these moments of transition, especially those who are like 35 to 45, again, that's big astrological middle age, a lot of folks are coming to me because they're like, I'm doing something wrong. I've gone down this path and I've, been doing all this work of trying to find myself and all this and that, but I feel, but I feel bad, right? It's usually, it ends up being in some kind of like feeling bad or things fell apart or like, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. You're not, y'all. That's what it looks like to die. That's the process. That's the process. It's not about right or wrong. So there's also a way, as we're talking about getting queer right now and queering things, this is a deconstruction process. And deconstruction is not just from the church, like I said last week. Deconstruction is a kind of unearthing, a bulldozing, a jackhammering of the foundations of the logics that set the cosmology, that then shape the stories that lay the foundations of the structures of society. And one of those biggest kind of structures, right, is this binary way of thinking, right or wrong, yes, no, up, down, black, white, good or bad. It's not good or bad. It is what happens when you die. It's what happens when you release a storyline that you've clung to as your floor. I need you to think about it literally. So representation is not getting us liberation. When we are being forced to be represented via the monsters that constructed these projects to begin with, we can do better. And I want us to do better. All right. Now, you in Chicago, we gonna dream on this new moon in Aquarius, in a queer ass space with a bunch of queer ass folks. February 17th, 7 p.m., Dorothy downstairs. We're going to be queering dreams and dreaming. I got Forrest Brooks, my creative partner, on the DJ set. He's going to literally be spinning sounds as we converse with my friend, Dr. Moya Bailey, as she literally throws some cards. And Spirit will enter. Spirit's the one that's going to lead this conversation. So if you want to see and look and be a part of an incubator and have another template, not the template, a template that you can engage with, in collective dreaming, then come on out. It'll be a good time. Folks who are asking, it is video recorded. It is not streamed because it's part of my larger Queer and Chaos project. And the panels conversations that we have had, all 5 of them, will be part of a larger film project that I'll be working with my co-producer, Forrest Brooks. So be on the lookout for that later this year, okay? And besides that, y'all, I'll be back next week. If you're in the Patreon, we will be coming back online in video form, okay, for the different tiers that I do that for. Just stay tuned for that. I'll have more information about that this week online, okay? Because I'm playing with the archetypes and storytelling. And that's why I wanted to lay the foundation here of us taking seriously how we tell stories as a way to examine our readiness or non of true change. And if we can take this seriously right now and set the foundations, then there can actually be futures for those who are coming after us in which they will be actually able to live. So this is where we have to be both selfish and selfless. We have to be selfish enough to bring the self back down and inhabit the self, but be selfless to understand that it will not be our generation that reaps the full benefits of it. But if we can lay the foundations, we will have a populations after us who can speak our names so that when we are dead, we truly can be elevated and have the influence of society in the present day. So I need you to take your story seriously. I need you to take your life seriously so that you can take your death seriously. And in that death making, that is how we create real bloodlines, real contracts, and also real spiritual courts that actually can thrive and grow and have creations here. So it's the fall of the fucking patriarch. And I really do mean that. But the only way that motherfucker's going to fall is if we take responsibility for creating. This is not a time of peace. It's a time of creation. All right, y'all. That's all I got. Keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it's through the dreamscapes we can bring the realities that we want to bring into the present. Join me here next week. We're going to keep going into it. All right. Till next time. Take care of yourselves. How can you live with the world on your shoulders? I said, how can you live with the world on your shoulders? You can't, so shake it off. It's time to dance.
Dance to the music, it really doesn't matter who's looking. 'Cause I've been working, and tonight I deserve it. The lights are flashing, and now I'm ready for action. So you can meet me on the floor, losing control.
It's time to get wild, feet on the floor, head held high. Feel that sweat down your back, releasing in the church of house music. Just below the surface, scratching, clawing, roaring its way out. Reclaim what was stolen, the wild in all of us. So it's time to dance, releasing in the church of house music. Let